Rogue traders trace their lineage back to the earliest efforts of the Imperium to explore, expand, and enforce its rule over the uncharted void. Their existence is as old as the Great Crusade, and in many ways they are direct products of it. During the early years of the Imperium's aggressive expansion, it became clear that the bureaucratic machinery of the Adeptus Terra could not reach into every star system with equal precision or speed. The Emperor, seeking a solution that would preserve initiative while maintaining loyalty, created the legal instrument known as the Warrant of Trade. This writ, issued under his name, granted its bearer full authority to explore, claim, and exploit unknown regions beyond Imperial control. It gave rogue traders the status of quasi-autonomous agents, answerable only to the High Lords of Terra, or, in many cases, not even to them. The origin of the warrant was not simply administrative, it was also ideological. In the early Imperium, the Emperor still championed the imperial truth, a belief in reason, progress, and secular order. Rogue traders, many of them drawn from noble bloodlines or proven war heroes, were tasked with spreading this truth beyond the Imperium's frontier. They were both envoys and enforcers, carrying with them missionaries, diplomats, and warriors alike. However, as time passed and the ecclesiarchy rose to prominence, the rogue traders' mandate evolved. The original secular ethos was gradually replaced by zealous piety. Traders who once carried scientists and philosophers now escorted confessors and inquisitors. Their ships became mobile cathedrals as often as they were exploratory vessels. Biologically, rogue traders are fully human. There are no known sanctioned mutations or enhancements exclusive to their kind, though individual rogue traders have been known to undergo extensive augmentation, depending on their personal preferences, injuries sustained in their travels, or the cultures they interact with. The typical rogue trader stands no different in physiology from a well-maintained noble of Terra. Between 170 and 200 centimeters in height, often lean or wiry due to life aboard starships, with fair to pale skin depending on their void exposure. Hair color, eye shape, and other features vary according to genetic heritage, though many are the product of interstellar bloodlines, and thus display eclectic mixes of traits. It is common to see ritual scarification, exotic piercings, or alien tattoos among their ranks, less for vanity and more as a ledger of their travels. The military role of rogue traders is both opportunistic and versatile. Each warrant of trade grants its bearer near absolute authority over their fleet and holdings. While some limit themselves to a few vessels and a compact crew, others command entire armadas rivaling small segmentum forces. Their tactics vary dramatically depending on resources and temperament. Some favour diplomacy and trade, offering goods and alliances in exchange for safe passage. Others prefer overwhelming firepower, using macro batteries and void shields to obliterate resistance before it forms. The distinction lies in the doctrine they follow. Some rogue traders borrow heavily from Imperial Navy traditions, maintaining strict discipline and command hierarchy. Others operate like pirate kings, with loosely affiliated bands of mercenaries, Xenos auxiliaries, and post-human bodyguards. Recruitment practices reflect this same diversity. In some dynasties, crews are meticulously selected from Schola Progenium graduates, naval cadets, or hive-born veterans. In others, press-ganging, bribery and enslavement are the norm. Rogue traders frequently employ specialists, astropaths for communication, navigators from the navis nobilitae to guide them through the warp, and sanctioned psychers for defense or offense. It is not uncommon for a single ship to carry an eclectic mixture of tech priests, missionary preachers, Xenos interpreters, and even death cult assassins, all serving a specific function in the trader's entourage. Culturally, rogue trader dynasties form their own miniature empires. These are passed down through generations, with the Warrant of Trade acting as a hereditary charter. This inheritance is often accompanied by arcane rituals, hidden vaults of knowledge, and long-standing vendettas. While some rogue traders serve the Imperium with unwavering loyalty, others are semi-heretical, pursuing their own goals while maintaining just enough favour to avoid censure. The culture aboard their vessels tends to reflect the trader's origin. A dynasty from Terra might enforce strict decorum and adherence to Gothic traditions, while one from the Eastern Fringe might allow loose governance, exposure to Xenos languages, or even limited religious syncretism. The social structure aboard a rogue trader vessel is deeply hierarchical. At the top is the trader themselves, whose authority is absolute. Beneath them lie the officers, master helmsmen, void masters, and chief gunners. Then come the specialists, astropaths, navigators, chirurgeons, and tech adepts. The majority of the crew consist of voidmen, conscripts, penal workers, or bonded labourers. Internal discipline is maintained through a mixture of fear, reward, and rigid tradition. Mutiny is rare but not unheard of. However, the consequences are typically lethal and immediate. Many traders employ body doubles, genetically engineered clones, or decoys to safeguard against assassination attempts from within. Technology aboard rogue trader vessels is a hybrid of old and new. Some ships are pre-Imperial relics, refitted over millennia with Mechanicus support. Others are experimental or looted from Xenos empires. This technological flexibility is both a blessing and a danger. Traders are not bound by the same dogmatic constraints as the Adeptus Mechanicus. They can use Xenos tech, develop forbidden weaponry, and experiment with psychic engines so long as they do not provoke the wrong kind of attention. Some have ships outfitted with cloaking devices, teleportariums, and artificial intelligence servitors, devices considered borderline heretical in more orthodox circles. However, the use of such tools carries great risk. The Ordo Xenos and Ordo Hereticus have purged entire dynasties over such indulgences, often without warning. Among the most famous rogue traders in recorded Imperial history is Janus Drake, whose exploits during the Blackstone Fortress expeditions earned him both commendations and covert censure. Other notable figures include Caligos Winterscale, a man whose dominion spans entire sectors and who wields power equal to some Imperial governors. There is also the enigmatic Theodora Valkyra, whose ship vanished into the halo stars for over 200 years, only to return unchanged, bearing artifacts and prisoners from races unknown to the Imperium. These individuals, while vastly different in personality and method, share one trait. They act outside the bounds of conventional Imperial control, yet remain vital to its continued expansion. Behaviourally, rogue traders often exhibit traits common to long-term voidfarers. They are methodical, cautious, and prone to bouts of extreme paranoia, yet they must also be charismatic, persuasive, and adaptable. The best traders can navigate both Xenos rituals and high Gothic diplomacy without faltering. They're opportunists at heart, always seeking the next relic, alliance, or unexplored system. Many develop unhealthy obsessions, be it with forbidden knowledge, personal legacy, or the eradication of a particular alien race. Their rituals are just as diverse. Some open each voyage with blood offerings to the Emperor, others burn incense mixed with soil from their homeworlds before every warp jump. Hierarchical divisions exist within their ranks, not just between officer and crew, but among family branches. Rival cousins or bastard heirs may serve aboard the same vessel, waiting for the moment to seize command. Rogue trader vessels are extensions of their owner's will, ideology, and paranoia. They are not mere transports or warships. They are mobile dominions, each functioning as a microcosm of their dynasty's structure and culture. No two rogue trader ships are exactly alike. While many originate from standard hull patterns sanctioned by the Adeptus Mechanicus, such as the Jericho class or the Conquest class, years of retrofitting, refitting, and unsanctioned modification often leave them entirely unique in both function and appearance. Some bear sanctified Gothic architecture with soaring cathedrals embedded into their dorsal fins, while others display Xenos alloys, wreathed in unknown symbols and resistant to standard Auspex scans. Externally, these vessels may appear heavily ornamented, covered in gargoyles, purity seals, and armour plating carved with familial crests or historical kills. Internally, they are more chaotic. Entire decks might be given over to void monasteries, feral crew cults, or forbidden archives. Some rogue traders tolerate alien enclaves on lower decks, where translators and negotiators trade for unknown goods without direct human interaction. On larger ships, entire manufactorum sections produce custom ammunition or prototype engines, operated by hybrid crews of tech priests, slave engineers, and sometimes bound demons kept under psychic suppression fields. Many rogue trader dynasties view their vessels as living relics. The machine spirits of these ships are ancient and often unstable, requiring elaborate rituals to placate. Crew members might be forbidden from speaking aloud in certain hallways, or required to offer offerings to a shrine built around a malfunctioning cogitator core. Some traders have their navigators operate within psychic sanctums shielded by gold-leafed prayer runes, while others allow them full access to the ship's upper hierarchy as honoured members of the ruling circle. The ship's bridge itself may resemble a courtroom, a war chamber, or a throne room depending on the trader's preference, often adorned with thrones reinforced by servo chairs and backed by cherubic servitors. The relationship between rogue traders and the Adeptus Mechanicus is particularly delicate. By tradition, the Mechanicus honours the ancient nature of the Warrant of Trade, granting a measure of leniency to its bearers. However, this leniency is conditional. Rogue traders who stray too far from the Omnissiah's dogma risk censure, investigation, or even open hostility. There are documented cases of rogue traders being ambushed by Mechanicus explorators for violating the tech priesthood's boundaries, usually through the use or trade of Xenos technology. In turn, some rogue traders maintain private agreements with more radical factions of the Mechanicus, such as the Xenorite or Heretic sects. These alliances allow access to forbidden knowledge, but carry significant risk. Hierarchically, rogue trader dynasties often operate under a noble structure, with the trader acting as both political and military sovereign. Succession is rarely simple. While most warrants of trade are hereditary, passing through bloodlines or carefully arranged adoptions, there are countless cases of contested claims, bloody mutinies, or forged lineages. It is not uncommon for a warrant to pass into multiple hands simultaneously, each claimant seeking recognition from a different imperial authority. Some traders attempt to solve these disputes through duel, assassination, or even full-scale ship-to-ship combat. The Imperium, for its part, rarely intervenes. A warrant's validity is ultimately decided not by law, but by who survives longest while expanding imperial interests. Internally, dynasties are divided into primary and secondary lines. The primary bloodline holds the warrant and core assets, ships, resources, and contacts. Secondary lines act as diplomats, military aides, or governors of outposts established in uncharted systems. Over time, these cadet branches may evolve into rival factions, often plotting to usurp or redirect the dynasty's trajectory. Marriages, hostage exchanges, and political pacts are used to maintain cohesion. Occasionally, a disgraced or exiled branch might return, leading to civil war aboard the fleet. Some dynasties keep detailed genetic and psychic records of their bloodline to prevent infiltration or mutation, especially after exposure to warp anomalies or alien pathogens. The behavioural instincts of rogue traders are shaped by constant danger, isolation, and exposure to the unknown. They must be adaptable, multilingual, and capable of switching from diplomacy to extermination within minutes. Many develop complex rituals around decision-making. One common behaviour is the use of omens, coin flips, tarot draws, or navigator trance states to determine courses of action. Others maintain private oracles, often malfunctioning cogitators filled with half-truths and distorted data that they treat as gospel. In practical terms, most traders rely heavily on a small circle of trusted advisors, navigators, astropaths, fleet captains, and, if necessary, bonded inquisitors or mechanicus magi. Ethically, rogue traders operate on a different spectrum from the wider Imperium. They are not above trafficking in Xenos artifacts, engaging in limited trade with alien species, or experimenting with forbidden technologies. However, they also carry a deep-rooted sense of imperial responsibility. A trader who returns from the fringe with coordinates to a lost human colony, or the downfall of a Necron tomb world, can earn immense prestige and secure their dynasty's survival for generations. Their moral compass is therefore guided more by utility and legacy than by doctrine. Some walk the razor's edge, balancing piety with pragmatism. Others descend fully into mercenary behaviour, defending their choices with the justification that they serve the Emperor in results, if not in form. Among the more revered rituals of rogue trader dynasties are the binding of the ship, a ceremony conducted whenever a new warrant is passed to an heir. This rite involves a psychometric link between the successor and the ship's core cogitator, allowing for mutual recognition and access. Another is the rite of return, performed upon arriving from expeditions beyond charted space. Here, crew members are subject to weeks of interrogation, decontamination, and spiritual cleansing, partially to ensure loyalty and partially to remove any psychic or biological contamination. Traders who neglect this process often suffer unexplained crew deaths, mutinies, or worse, becoming carriers for psychic anomalies or warp-tainted diseases. Internally, divisions within the crew are sharp, officers and bridge personnel enjoy clean quarters, private food reserves, and personal servitors. Mid-tier specialists operate in relative safety, but are heavily surveilled. The lowest ranks, deck workers, gunners, maintenance crews, often live in slum-like compartments under strict curfew, where life expectancy is measured in warp jumps. Social tension is usually kept in check by the threat of force, although some traders implement meritocratic systems that reward innovation or loyalty. These rare exceptions often produce surprisingly efficient crews, though they are viewed with suspicion by more traditionalist dynasties. The trader's flagship, in many cases, doubles as a mobile fortress. A common defensive configuration includes multi-layered void shields, prow-mounted lance batteries, dorsal hangar bays housing atmospheric fighters, and torpedo tubes capable of launching virus warheads. Some traders possess experimental grav weapons or archaeotech disintegration beams of unknown origin. Defensively, these ships rely on both technological countermeasures and internal security. Veteran squads of heavily armoured enforcers patrol high-value sections, while servitor guardians are wired into choke points and blast doors. Psychic defences, maintained by astropathic choirs, provide some resistance to demonic incursions or warp echoes. Technologically, rogue trader fleets are unbound by most of the restrictions imposed by the cult Mechanicus. They use machine spirits considered too volatile for standard use, genetic scanning systems from Dark Age vaults, and shield harmonics adapted from Xenos sources. The philosophical attitude toward technology is also unique. While they show ritual respect for the machine god, many traders treat technology as a means to an end rather than a spiritual entity. Some are engineers in their own right, modifying weapon systems with unapproved firmware or grafting alien materials onto ship hulls. Others delegate this entirely to Heretech advisors, keeping plausible deniability while pushing the limits of what their fleet can accomplish. The success and failure of a rogue trader dynasty often hinge not just on military power or exploration, but on the ability to play the long game. Traders build influence with planetary governors, forge trade deals with powerful merchant houses, and sponsor ecclesiarchal missions to bring back favour. They donate relics to the Adepta Sororitas, fund explorator fleets of the Mechanicus, or trade forbidden materials with radical inquisitors, all to stay just valuable enough that no imperial institution sees profit in removing them. In the eyes of the Imperium, the rogue trader is both tool and threat. Their unpredictability is their strength, and their survival is proof of their usefulness. Among the more obscure yet influential aspects of rogue trader culture is their use of hybrid command structures blending naval, mercantile, and exploratory hierarchies. Traditional Imperial Navy command protocol is often preserved in broad form: officers, midship command staff, junior voidmen. But rogue traders adapt this structure to suit their eccentricities. For example, it is common for a rogue trader to replace the title of first officer with heir apparent, treating command succession as both a practical and ceremonial affair. Other dynasties may employ Xenos titles within their internal bureaucracy, especially if their vessel has spent significant time integrated within non-imperial societies. These linguistic shifts often serve dual purposes: to honour alien diplomatic conventions when trading abroad, and to obscure hierarchy from internal rivals. While their authority is absolute aboard their own vessels, rogue traders are not exempt from the slow encroachment of imperial institutions. Over time, it is common for ecclesiarchal delegates, Mechanicus envoys, or even inquisitorial observers to embed themselves within the dynasty's operations. Sometimes this occurs by necessity. A trader entering a warped region of unknown threats may request an Ordo-Xenos specialist. Other times, it is imposed without consent. A trader suspected of harbouring forbidden Xenos tech may find a missionary forcibly assigned to their ship under the guise of spiritual guidance. This creeping oversight is tolerated only to the extent that the trader can afford it. More successful dynasties possess the political leverage to reject such requests outright, while lesser ones must comply or risk revocation of their privileges. Diplomatic dealings with other imperial bodies vary in tone and texture, depending on the trader's reputation. A dynasty known for rediscovering lost colonies or destroying Necron tomb worlds is likely to enjoy a degree of prestige and latitude. Their arrivals are met with parades, ceremonial offerings, and political overtures. Conversely, traders associated with controversial discoveries, warp anomalies, radical Mechanicus technologies, or sanction Xenos alliances may be met with unease or covert hostility. In some cases, Imperial officials use rogue traders as disposable assets. They may direct them to explore systems of dubious interest, hoping that the trader will either validate the region's significance or perish quietly in the void. The trader, for their part, understands this risk and is often engaged in counter-intrigue of their own. Culturally, rogue traders exhibit an extreme form of adaptability bordering on duplicity. When negotiating with Imperial governors, they adopt the high Gothic of courtly nobility, invoking their dynastic rights and reciting the full lineage of their warrant. In Xenos courts, they may wear alien ceremonial armour, speak in coded binary, or adhere to blood ritual customs if necessary. This flexibility is a matter of survival as much as diplomacy. The void beyond the Imperium is filled with entities who respect only strength, tradition, or cunning, often in bewildering combinations. A rogue trader must not only learn these customs, but also appear to honour them without betraying the interests of the Imperium. This balancing act is never easy. Some fail, becoming warped in ideology, or twisted by exposure to alien philosophies. Others master it, walking the line between human and inhuman with cold precision. Within their own domains, rogue traders often develop pseudo-feudal systems that mirror those of the broader Imperium, but operate under vastly different logic. A planet rediscovered and claimed by a trader may become a vassal world, ruled by a local administrator loyal to the dynasty rather than to the Imperium directly. These settlements are usually maintained through economic dependency. The trader provides protection, technology, or rare materials, and in exchange the world supplies crew, foodstuffs, or raw ore. In more stable dynasties, these relationships endure for centuries. In more aggressive ones, they are stripped of resources and abandoned once their strategic value declines. While technically obligated to report such discoveries to the administratum, many traders delay or obfuscate these reports, buying themselves time to extract maximum value before Imperial oversight arrives. The societal makeup aboard a rogue trader's vessel is deeply stratified, but also more diverse than any typical Imperial ship. At the top lies the dynasty itself, the trader, their family, and any adopted heirs. These individuals occupy suites decorated with personal artifacts, including items from long-lost civilizations, Xenos relics, and family heirlooms dating back to the Great Crusade. Their chambers are guarded by elite bodyguards, often gene-bulked veterans or hybrid warriors of uncertain origin. Below them are the officers and specialists. These include the ship's Master of Ordnance, Helmsmaster, Astropath Prime, and Navigator. The latter often treated with a mixture of awe and isolation, due to their warp-mutated physiology. Further below are the auxiliary ranks. These include guild factors, trade envoys, archivists, and codewrights, who manage data flow and trade deals across multiple systems. Beneath them lie the armsmen and crew, ranked voidmen, servitor gangs, and maintenance workers, many of whom live and die without ever seeing a planet's surface. These individuals may be drafted from conquered populations born aboard ship generationally, or purchased as indentured labour. Their loyalty is enforced through food rations, religious conditioning, and the ever-present threat of vacuum exposure. Mutinies are rare due to the internal surveillance systems many traders employ. Even on smaller ships, loyalty monitors, psycho-conditioned enforcers trained to detect signs of sedition, patrol the lower decks regularly. In terms of values, most rogue trader dynasties are defined by three overriding principles: expansion, survival, and legacy. Expansion refers to the relentless pursuit of new systems, new opportunities, and new sources of wealth or knowledge. This drive is not always aggressive. Many traders succeed through diplomacy and alliance rather than conquest. Survival speaks to the constant threats faced in the void: warp storms, alien ambushes, rival dynasties, and internal betrayal. A trader must always think 2 moves ahead, maintaining hidden safe routes, secret fuel reserves, or fallback ships in case of disaster. Legacy, finally, refers to the long-term stability of the dynasty. It is common for traders to invest in genetic archives, clone reserves, or encrypted databanks containing instructions for their successors in the event of death. One unusual psychological trait common among rogue traders is the cultivation of personal myth. While the Imperium is saturated with propaganda, traders often craft their own stories, distinct from official narratives. These may be wildly exaggerated tales of Xenos battles, warp-time miracles, or impossible negotiations. The purpose is twofold: to bolster morale aboard ship, and to ensure that their name becomes currency among frontier settlements. These myths are disseminated through picked recordings, sermons, or encoded astropathic transmissions. Some traders even carry personal heralds or storytellers to recite their exploits at every port of call. While many in the Imperium view this behaviour as vanity, it often serves a strategic function, creating an aura of power that discourages attacks and encourages cooperation. The presence of Xenos technology and culture aboard rogue trader vessels is an open secret. Though technically heretical, many traders engage in controlled exposure to alien tools, languages, and biological samples. The reasons vary. Some traders view themselves as scholars or collectors, seeking to understand the galaxy beyond the rigid confines of Imperial dogma. Others see it purely as a tactical edge, using cloaking devices, psionic scanners, or zero-gravity combat suits obtained through bartered trade or battlefield scavenging. A select few go even further, integrating alien advisors or bodyguards into their inner circle. This behaviour is highly risky. Should an inquisitorial audit occur, the trader must be able to justify their actions or possess enough political protection to suppress inquiry. There have been recorded cases of dynasties erased entirely by the Ordo Xenos for failing to manage this balance. The lines between loyalty and heresy are especially thin at the fringes of Imperial space, and rogue traders walk them with practiced care. It is not unusual for a trader to fund a radical Mechanicus experiment on one voyage, only to donate a captured Chaos relic to the ecclesiarchy on the next. Their success depends not on ideological consistency, but on utility. They are judged by results: new worlds open to colonization, ancient human enclaves brought back into the fold, or valuable artifacts recovered and handed over to sanctioned authorities. So long as they continue to deliver, most are permitted a wide berth. It is only when their behaviour ceases to benefit the wider Imperium that their protections collapse, often violently. At the farthest edges of Imperial reach, where maps become suggestion and warp travel grows unstable, rogue traders represent the only consistent human presence. Their fleets become travelling cities, each housing thousands of souls, each ruled by the same ancient family for generations. These fleets are sometimes mistaken for pirate armadas or Xenos war caravans by planetary observers unfamiliar with the traders' sigils. In truth, they are neither. They are legally sanctioned, institutionally tolerated, and culturally independent engines of human ambition. They function as scouts, colonizers, diplomats, and warmongers, all depending on what the Imperium needs and what the trader desires. While rogue traders often operate beyond the reach of Imperial scrutiny, they are not immune to consequence. The Imperium may tolerate eccentricity and even degrees of heresy, so long as results are delivered, but its patience is not infinite. When a rogue trader dynasty draws too much attention, especially from the Ordo Hereticus or Ordo Xenos, it becomes the target of what is euphemistically known as corrective engagement. This can take the form of a quiet investigation, a forced reassignment of assets, or, when the situation has escalated too far, a sanctioned execution. Despite this, many rogue traders play a long game of political manoeuvring. They build contacts within the Inquisition, offer rare artifacts to Mechanicus conclaves, or sponsor ecclesiarchal missions in exchange for soft influence. These actions buy not just protection, but time. In practice, many rogue traders maintain a shadow portfolio of contingency plans. Hidden warp beacons, encrypted astropathic coordinates, and sealed data crypts are kept in reserve in the event of betrayal or censure. Trusted crew are rotated into deep sleeper states on auxiliary ships, ready to reawaken the dynasty should the main vessel fall. In more radical dynasties, cloning protocols or AI-driven holographic proxies ensure that the trader can continue to operate in some form, even posthumously. While these measures are officially forbidden, they are rarely pursued unless made public. The Imperium, vast and overstretched, often has little appetite for pursuing the sins of a dynasty that still serves its ends. An area of rogue trader society rarely discussed outside of specialist inquisitorial dossiers is the presence of gene forging and hereditary manipulation within certain dynasties. Over time, exposure to warp storms, alien pathogens, and the unique atmospheric conditions of void life have altered the physical and genetic profile of many dynastic families. While some lineages attempt to reverse these mutations through strict eugenics, others lean into them, developing bloodlines with reinforced immune systems, heightened night vision, or even psychic sensitivity. The more radical cases involve the deliberate introduction of non-human DNA, usually to enhance combat effectiveness or resistance to specific environmental threats. These alterations are almost always kept hidden, maintained through bribed media and falsified documentation. Nonetheless, inquisitorial audits have uncovered more than a few dynasties whose heirs bore no genetic resemblance to their ancestral founders. Despite their tendency towards secrecy, rogue traders are often flamboyant in presentation. This contradiction serves a specific function: distraction. Ornate armour, flowing robes, and bionic augmentations draw attention away from what is not being shown. A trader may wear a cloak made from the skin of a Tyranid warrior, but say nothing of the hive-spawned psyker they keep chained in their vaults. Their weapons are equally expressive: power swords with family crests, bolt pistols engraved with ancient map routes, and plasma rifles modified with xenos. Heat displacement coils are not uncommon. These objects serve both as personal tools and statements of identity. They communicate wealth, reach, and survivability in the face of impossible odds. Over time, most rogue traders develop a deep personal paranoia. The void is not merely a hostile place in physical terms, it is spiritually and mentally corrosive. Warp storms, psychic anomalies, and exposure to alien belief systems wear down even the most resilient minds. Traders frequently employ librarian staff or navigator cult historians to track their own decisions, recording not only actions taken but justifications made. These logs serve a dual purpose. They provide continuity in case of incapacitation, and they act as a sanity check against memory degradation. Traders who spend too long away from Imperial space often begin to question the moral and metaphysical boundaries they once upheld. Some even keep confessionals on board, not for faith, but to exercise guilt through the act of verbal release. Rituals of command form a stabilizing factor in such environments. Traders typically begin each expedition with a consecration rite, invoking the authority of their warrant and ritually cleansing their bridge staff. This may include symbolic bloodletting, recitation of family oaths, or a warp echo ceremony conducted by the navigator. Mid-voyage rituals differ by dynasty. Some hold silent observation periods every warp cycle to honour fallen crew. Others rotate command through a council of captains, ensuring that no single voice dominates decision-making during particularly treacherous journeys. The return to Imperial space is always marked by a purification cycle, often accompanied by a full data purge of the ship's lower cogitators and a screening of all non-core personnel by sanctioned psychers. The issue of inheritance is a permanent undercurrent in rogue trader life. With most dynasties passing control via bloodline, questions of succession are rarely simple. Some traders name their heirs early, involving them in command decisions to prepare them for leadership. Others remain cryptic until death, leaving contradictory wills or encoded instructions that trigger complex decision trees. More paranoid traders maintain multiple heirs in isolation from one another, ensuring that no single assassination can destabilize the line. In more exotic cases, heirship is determined by ritual combat, psychic compatibility with the ship's machine spirit, or trials set within warp realms conjured by bound astropaths. These methods are rarely documented and exist more as legend than recorded fact, but they are whispered with enough consistency across dynasties to suggest a kernel of truth. Weapons and armour carried by rogue traders and their elite crews are similarly diverse. While standard-issue carapace armour and lass weaponry are available, they are rarely used. Traders prefer rare, customised equipment. Power armour modified for void deployment, Gorse-based rifles stolen from Necron tombs, and gravitic blades capable of collapsing matter into microsingularities are not unheard of. Some of the oldest dynasties carry weapons dating back to the dark age of technology, devices whose original purpose is no longer understood, but which still function with terrifying efficiency. These weapons are usually stored within vaults, accessible only to the trader and their most loyal aides, and are deployed only in moments of existential threat. It is not uncommon for a trader to keep a personal cache of weapons that would be classified as exterminatus grade if officially discovered. The command crew of a rogue trader vessel operates with a fluid hierarchy. Each member is both specialist and advisor. Navigators, bound by their own genetic curse and dynastic politics, occupy a precarious but essential role. They are both valued and feared, often housed in isolated towers or inner sanctums designed to accommodate their unique psychic needs. Astropaths, soul bonded to the Emperor, form the communication lifeline between the fleet and the Imperium. Their minds are fragile from prolonged warp exposure, and many develop ritual habits to preserve coherence, singing specific notes before speech, speaking only in third person, or painting scenes from their visions in private quarters. Tech priests aboard rogue trader ships often hail from fringe sects of the Mechanicus. These include Xenorites obsessed with alien technologies, data smiths dedicated to experimental machine spirits, and Magos explorators who view the trader as a means to circumvent Martian restrictions. These tech priests are both boon and liability. They can refit weapons mid-battle, decode ancient Xenos languages, and repair near-dead reactor cores. But they also pose a constant risk of schism, especially if their goals conflict with those of the dynasty. Traders who rely too heavily on their tech priests often find themselves subtly replaced, their command authority hollowed out by rituals and protocols they no longer control. The rogue element of rogue trader operations is most visible in their decision-making. Unlike Imperial Navy captains or administratum bureaucrats, traders are not constrained by doctrinal precedent. They make deals on instinct, based on incomplete data, extrapolated history, or even dreams. It is not unusual for a trader to change course mid-expedition based on a single intercepted transmission, or to open negotiations with an alien race the Imperium has never heard of. These actions may lead to disaster, or they may produce discoveries that alter the strategic balance of entire sectors. The Imperium has learned to accept this variance. While the bureaucracy of the Adeptus Terra would never admit it, the unpredictable nature of rogue traders is one of the few tools they have against the equally unpredictable threats lurking in the galactic dark. The first official documentation of rogue trader activity appears in Adeptus Administratum records dating to the latter years of the Great Crusade. While earlier expeditions into unclaimed space had been undertaken by Imperial army commanders, Mechanicus explorators, or sanctioned planetary governors, these efforts were increasingly hampered by bureaucratic bottlenecks and conflicting jurisdictional claims. The solution emerged from within the early councils of Terra, where it was determined that limited sovereign authority could be issued through legal instruments known as Warrants of Trade. The first of these were granted under direct authorization from the Emperor himself, often handwritten or impressed with seals carrying residual psychic imprint. The precise wording of these early warrants was both broad and absolute. They permitted the bearer to claim territory, engage with alien races, and enforce Imperial presence as they saw fit, without recourse to the normal chain of command. These documents also included clauses recognizing hereditary succession, allowing dynasties to form around the original charter. The Administratum's earliest surviving records of these warrants are incomplete, damaged by time, fire, or intentional redaction. However, references appear in data logs concerning segmentum solar expansion between years 100 and 135 of the 31st millennium, most notably in connection with the Ulanor reclamation zones. One such warrant was given to Lord Militant Sarvandrel, later confirmed to have encountered and defeated 3 Orc warbands without requesting reinforcement from local Crusade fleets. The documentation lists this operation under Category Primaris Victus, unsanctioned victory now ratified. Further evidence of early rogue trader operations can be found in the archives of the Explorator Corps. A Mechanicus expedition to the Hadrax anomaly during the latter years of the Crusade records cooperation with a vessel identified as the Gilded Fracture, captained by a rogue trader named Acheron Vale. This figure, otherwise absent from primary Terran records, appears in multiple Tech Adept memoranda for his possession of pre-Imperial stellar cartography and forbidden Martian schemata. While his presence was officially condemned by the ruling Archmagus of the sector, subsequent acquisition of 3 functioning stasis pods and the remains of an STC fragment resulted in the Mechanicus issuing a retroactive contract of mutual endorsement. The Administratum's approach to rogue traders during this period was largely defined by pragmatism. While these figures operated outside traditional authority structures, they also achieved results that conventional fleets could not. In a notable example from the Coronis Expanse, the rogue trader Iridia Cassalis negotiated the peaceful integration of 12 independent human worlds that had previously resisted Imperial contact. The official records from the sector governor at the time list her efforts as undesirable, unauthorized, yet logistically irreplaceable. The economic returns from these worlds over the next 2 centuries were immense, eventually prompting the Administratum to issue standardized reporting protocols for all rogue traders operating within Segmentum Obscurus. One such incident occurred during the Errant Spiral campaign, where the rogue trader Vento Narthax violated a Mechanicus quarantine protocol, breaching an artificial planetoid containing a non-functional Necron relay beacon. While the resulting radiation leak cost the lives of over 2,000 Voidmen and 4 Tech priests, the recovered monolith was later used in the construction of a null-field archive on Mars. The Mechanicus log entry closes with a paradoxical notation: violation confirmed, sanction not advised, outcome technologically advantageous. By the time of the Novaterra Interregnum, a period marked by civil unrest and schism within the Administratum itself, rogue traders had become essential instruments of expansion and damage control. With the Imperium fractured politically and military resources stretched thin, traders were often deployed as agents of soft power. They reopened trade with fringe systems, re-established astropathic contact, and recovered lost gene seed stores from devastated battlefields. One notable operation involved the dynasty of Kedmon Voyel, whose fleet is documented recovering over 800 progenoid glands from the remnants of a destroyed Adeptus Astartes chapter during the Argus subsector collapse. The recovered material was turned over to the local chapter keepers, earning the dynasty both a significant favour and a multi-decade tax exemption authorised by the Adeptus Munitorum. During this time, standardised procedures began to emerge. The Administratum implemented codified systems for cataloguing trader discoveries, requiring periodic reports to be transmitted via astropathic relay or carried aboard secure data vaults delivered to Sector Command. Compliance was inconsistent. Some dynasties submitted complete encrypted reports, often delayed by years or decades due to warp interference. Others withheld data, submitting only fragments or doctored summaries. The penalties for such actions varied depending on local enforcement capacity. In many outer sectors, there was simply no means of compelling rogue trader compliance short of military action, and thus the practice of incentivized reporting became common. Traders who submitted verified discoveries were granted extended void lanes, orbital docking rights, or tithe exemptions. Those who failed to comply were marked for additional inspection upon return, but rarely pursued beyond that. The Mechanicus, meanwhile, began forging closer ties with select dynasties. Rather than opposing trader activity, many Forge worlds began embedding tech priests directly aboard rogue trader vessels. These arrangements, often unofficial and outside Martian oversight, served both parties. The traders gained onboard technical expertise, access to rare maintenance rituals, and support in decoding alien machinery. The tech priests received unrestricted access to Xenos relics and ancient data vaults otherwise forbidden under treaty code. One such example was the embedment of Magos Thren Halvox aboard the Eternal Comet, a light cruiser operating in the Scarus Fringe. Halvox's reports to his Forge world detailed the acquisition of a living data creature, assumed to be an artificial intelligence byproduct of the Men of Iron. The Mechanicus immediately redacted the report, sterilized the local datanet, and offered the Eternal Comet a full retrofitting at their expense. The official reason was listed as engine instability due to gravimetric warping. As the age of apostasy drew near, rogue trader documentation grew more scattered. The religious upheaval following the rise of Gojavandaya resulted in widespread administrative breakdown, and many data caches from this era were either lost or rewritten to reflect new ecclesiarchal doctrine. However, internal Mechanicus archives contain references to voidborn sovereigns, a term believed to refer to high-status rogue traders operating independently of both Terra and Mars. These figures are suspected to have engaged in private empire building, establishing permanent strongholds in uncharted sectors. While the records do not confirm direct rebellion, several entries describe persistent refusal to acknowledge priority codes and use of non-sanctioned warp routes inconsistent with approved stellar cartography. Not all documented rogue trader encounters during this period were cooperative. The invasion of the Banish Rift in the late 36th millennium saw at least 2 trader fleets implicated in supply theft and illegal acquisition of Mechanicus artifacts. According to the data recovered from an aborted inquisitorial cross-sector audit, the fleets of J.L. Monarch and Hester von Reich conducted simultaneous salvage operations in a region under Martian quarantine due to high Necron activity. Both fleets recovered numerous objects later classified as proto-cryptic artifacts. When approached by a Mechanicus enforcement detachment, Reich's fleet responded with full void fire, destroying one Skitarii escort vessel and crippling a second. Monarch's ship vanished during the same encounter, only to reappear 2 decades later at a trade conclave in the Calixis sector, its hull now bearing unknown alloy signatures and fully functional adaptive shielding. The Mechanicus filed a formal complaint, which was denied resolution due to a lack of shared jurisdiction. The dawn of the 37th millennium marked a subtle but significant evolution in how the Imperium regarded rogue trader activity. Following several centuries of unpredictable warp anomalies, mounting Xenos encounters, and unexplained sectoral collapses, the Administratum began issuing formalized observation orders to record all dynastic activities crossing beyond known space. These observational mandates were driven by multiple factors. First, an increasing volume of unexplained data returns, fragmented astropathic broadcasts, garbled machine code transmissions, and contradictory cartographic updates made it clear that more rogue trader fleets were operating deeper into the unknown than had been previously assumed. Second, multiple cases of recovered trader vessels showed signs of cultural, genetic, and technological drift. Crew members exhibited altered dialects, corrupted Imperial iconography, and in one case, the use of Xenos hybrid lingua as a command language. One of the earliest major documented instances from this period came from the dynasty of Craston Vale, whose ship Mercy of Iron returned to the Gothic sector after a recorded absence of over 400 years. The vessel's structure bore severe architectural mutation, with hull seams reinforced by unknown alloys and internal corridors warped by ambient gravity fields. The crew, while genetically human, showed elevated resistance to radiation and operated under a caste system entirely absent from any known Imperial social model. Attempts by sector authorities to detain the trader and initiate inquiry resulted in near uprising among local Voidport workers, who had come to view Vale's dynasty as liberators from decades of piracy. Administratum response was delayed by conflicting jurisdictional claims, allowing the trader to depart and vanish once again into the void. The formal record of this encounter includes the note, "Rogue compliance impractical, threat level moderate, outcome tolerated anomaly." It was around this time that certain Forge worlds began issuing their own Mechanicus writs to favoured rogue traders, a development that caused significant friction within both the Administratum and the Navis Nobilitae. These Mechanicus writs acted as parallel warrants, granting access to locked research zones, relic sites, and black-level technology vaults. The most well-known example is recorded in the Arcadium Scourge incident, wherein the rogue trader Janarus Hecht received exclusive salvage rights from the Forge world of Riza, following a large-scale Space Hulk incursion. During the operation, Hecht's crew recovered a gravity engine core of pre-Imperial design that showed evidence of limited sentience and self-correcting matter structure. Riza's Magi constructors classified the device as anomalous level A, replicative prime, and attempted immediate extraction. Hecht resisted, citing the contract's private clause, and retreated under escort into uncharted warp lanes. The matter remains unresolved in Riza's archives under the label Disputed Acquisition Awaiting Opportunity. In parallel with these developments, rogue traders increasingly became entangled in interinstitutional power dynamics. Sector-level Administratum officials, overwhelmed by the growing scale of fringe expansion, began leveraging traders as informal diplomatic agents. In sectors suffering from Astartes absenteeism or overextended Arbit's presence, traders were used to enforce trade compliance, coerce planetary allegiance, and even mediate disputes between Forge enclaves. The dynasty of Alien Sune is one such example. Her vessel, the Cantor's Wrath, was documented in Segmentum Tempestus, acting as both mediator and enforcer during the Darnax Treaty Accords, a conflict between a minor Forge world and a newly contacted feudal human civilization that claimed divine sovereignty over warp-harvested energy fields. Suna's success in securing technology transfer rights for the Mechanicus without igniting war earned her dynasty elevated status within both the Administratum's negotiation office and Riser's Xenorite observers. This success, however, came with consequences. By the mid-37th millennium, rogue traders began facing systematic challenges to their autonomy. The Administratum established a standing subdepartmental function under the segmentum chambers of verification, known internally as the Rogue Asset Oversight Cadre. This body's mandate included tracking warrant lineages, verifying hereditary claims, and investigating dynastic behaviour inconsistent with imperial norms. The primary tool used by the cadre was the investigative audit, a deep cogitator review of a dynasty's past data submissions, planetary interactions, and transaction records with imperial institutions. These audits were not legal proceedings per se, but acted as political leverage points. Dynasties that failed to cooperate often found themselves denied access to refueling ports, restricted from using known warp routes, or excluded from trade negotiations. Those that passed were granted increased operating zones or offered priority in military convoy requests. Rogue traders responded in varying ways. Some adapted, treating the cadre as another administrative force to be navigated or bribed. Others began falsifying data, planting decoy reports, or fragmenting their dynasties into splinter fleets to obfuscate total activity. One particularly successful strategy, employed by the Valthine dynasty, involved registering each ship in their fleet under a different variant of the original warrant, each authorized by a different segmentum authority. The administrative confusion this caused allowed them to bypass multiple audits for over 80 years before a full cross-referencing initiative exposed the duplication. Even then, enforcement was limited due to lack of jurisdictional overlap and the unexpected value of their simultaneous discoveries in the Ghoul stars. The Mechanicus response to increased administratum oversight was more politically cautious. While Martian authorities publicly supported the oversight measures, many Forge worlds quietly reinforced their direct relationships with rogue trader dynasties. This tension reached a quiet apex in the Deep Cascade expansion of the 38th millennium. During this event, 4 rogue trader dynasties, Torrents, Baerlock, Heshin, and Vrex, each operating under different warrants, entered a previously unreachable pocket of subspace following a coordinated navigator surge event. Within this space, multiple pre-imperial constructs were encountered, including a partially functioning orbital complex that generated anti-warp harmonics across a 100 light-year radius. While the Administratum demanded immediate reporting and handover of all data, each trader responded to a separate Forge world. The result was an unprecedented arm's-length standoff, wherein Mechanicus authorities refused to share findings with Terra unless granted permanent relic stewardship. Ultimately, the standoff was resolved by the agreement known as the Cascade Concord, wherein the traders received full salvage rights, the Mechanicus retained primary research control, and the Administratum was granted exclusive tithe privileges on all discovered population centres. This pattern repeated itself throughout the millennium. Rogue traders increasingly became intermediaries in a three-way tension between the bureaucratic Imperium, the religious industrial Mechanicus, and their own sovereign ambitions. Most dynasties adopted a policy of strategic opacity, offering limited compliance to all 3 factions while remaining fundamentally loyal only to their own line. The documents stored in the memory pylons of Vordras Station reveal how widespread this behaviour had become. Among the 13 surveyed dynasties operating in the Eastern Fringe during the final decades of the 38th millennium, 9 were found to have submitted contradictory reports to both the Mechanicus and Administratum. Several submitted falsified planetary tithe assessments, inflated population recovery estimates, or misidentified relic classifications to gain more favourable trade terms. Despite this, no punitive action was taken. The overall benefit of these dynasties' exploratory efforts outweighed the bureaucratic irregularities they introduced. Anomalous cases also proliferated. The Adeptus Terra officially recorded only a fraction of rogue trader losses during this period, but recovered Vox records, silent astropathic screams, and incomplete picked logs suggest that dozens of dynasties simply vanished. One incident of note involved the Thranus line, whose vessel the Halo's Det entered a warp breach in the Galatha spiral and transmitted a corrupted message 20 years later. The data fragment, recovered by an Explorator probe, included linguistic structures from 5 known alien dialects, several entirely new glyph structures, and a psychic echo signature linked to Necron command coding. The Administratum labelled the event Unrecoverable Incident, Contain and Redirect. The Mechanicus immediately restricted access to the sector, and all future trader activity in the region was subject to prior Magos Dominus review. By the end of the 38th millennium, the practice of assigning Mechanicus observers to rogue trader vessels had evolved into a formalised policy. These observers, often magi explorators or hybrid lex mechanics, were granted access to core systems, navigation logs, and salvage inventories. In some cases, they were even given veto power over certain operations. Traders that resisted found themselves refused maintenance support, denied access to forge maintained void lanes, or subjected to machine spirit interference when attempting to dock at forge facilities. While these measures were largely successful in ensuring Mechanicus interests were respected, they also bred resentment among dynasties that viewed themselves as sovereign entities. In isolated systems, open conflict between trader fleets and Mechanicus strike vessels was not unknown, though such engagements were usually buried under classified action logs and concealed behind redacted data wafers. The final centuries of the 38th millennium ushered in a period of systemic recalibration across both the Adeptus Administratum and Adeptus Mechanicus. With rogue trader dynasties now numbering in the hundreds, scattered across sectors barely charted or actively unstable, the Administratum shifted from reactive observation to statistical modelling. An initiative known as the Projection Mandate was established within the Segmentum Ultima Bureau of Expansion Oversight. Its aim was not to monitor each dynasty individually, an impossible task, but rather to aggregate large-scale behavioural trends. Using fragmentary warp echo records, navigator guild paths, and return on resource tallies, the Bureau attempted to predict the next 500 years of rogue trader operations and their likely intersection with Imperial strategic interests. The mandate's findings were contradictory. On one hand, dynasties contributed significantly to the recontact of human populations, the reopening of lost warp routes, and the recovery of ancient STC data fragments. On the other, they introduced instability by empowering sub-imperial planetary governance models, proliferating exposure to Xenos artifacts, and enabling cultural drift in isolated systems. In one report, the planet Vegas Primaris was identified as having adopted a trader dynasty's private crest as its planetary sigil, replacing the Aquila entirely. Administratum clerks marked the planet for doctrinal reassessment, but no correction ever took place. The dynasty in question, later identified as the Laxon Fold, had since moved on and ceased all communication. In absence of conflict, the system remained unassimilated and, by the Administratum's own assessment, nominally compliant. Meanwhile, the Adeptus Mechanicus saw a slow evolution in their approach to rogue traders. What began as opportunistic partnerships and embedded observers transformed into regulated technomandate exchanges. Under this policy, Magos explorators would be rotated into dynastic fleets on cycles lasting decades, provided with standing authority to log, evaluate, and claim any technological find not previously documented within Mechanicus archives. While this theoretically preserved Martian authority over recovered relics, in practice it resulted in frequent disputes over definitions. Traders argued over the term previously documented, and many artifacts were claimed under technical loopholes that defined unknown origin as anything lacking full genetic or gravimetric index. Internal Mechanicus memos reveal a growing concern that too many traders had begun to internalize Mechanicus logic without Mechanicus discipline. One Magos labelled the trend as cognitive contamination, ritual without submission. A particularly complex case was that of the Myrophaean outpost chain. Located in a subsector beyond the Hadrex Spire, this ring of artificial structures was first discovered by a Mechanicus trader joint venture in the early 39th millennium. Initial scans showed all the hallmarks of Dark Age construction: self-regenerating alloys, non-Euclidean spatial folds, and radiation frequencies synchronized with warp latency. The dynasty involved, the Athex Crucible, immediately activated salvage protocols and began partial disassembly of the outer structure. The embedded Magos opposed this, citing precepts under the Lex Mechanica Unclaimed. When the trader persisted, the Magos transmitted an immediate request for Skeeter reinforcement. By the time the reinforcements arrived, both the outer modules and the Crucible's vessel were gone. Only fragments of thought skin were recovered, neural coding wrapped in thin layers of fluid alloy. The Mechanicus sealed the region and issued a Red-class silence code. Administratum records note the incident as unresolved dispute active no-fly directive. Tensions were not always the result of technological divergence. Cultural exposure remained a constant risk, and Mechanicus ethnographic monitors began noting an increase in rogue dialects, non-standard liturgical behaviour, and hybrid forms of religious observance aboard rogue trader vessels. One detailed report from the Explorator vessel Belief Engine described a dynastic fleet whose shipboard rituals combined emperor worship, ancient Terran polytheism, and Xenos symbolic logic. While the fleet had recently delivered over 100 intact data obelisks from the Damel Enclave, the presence of forbidden iconography triggered an alert within the wider Mechanicus theological network. The obelisks were redirected to Mars for full decontamination and decoding. The dynasty was allowed to continue operating, though its movements were now shadowed by an unmarked Mechanicus vessel, ostensibly for navigational alignment. The Administratum, for its part, increasingly relied on rogue traders not only as explorers, but as stabilizers of weakly held systems. In sectors experiencing tithe disruption or civil rebellion, a trader could be dispatched to enforce order with tools beyond the reach of traditional institutions. This included not only firepower, but psychological leverage, financial manipulation, or ecological blackmail. One documented operation in the Hecatomb cluster shows the trader militant Varus Jan deploying atmospheric nullifiers over a rebellious agri-world, reducing crop output by 70% over 3 planetary cycles. The population, faced with famine, capitulated without bloodshed. Jan reported the incident to the Adeptus Munitorum as agroeconomic pacification. The local Administratum Bureau awarded him formal commendation and a 50-year exemption from transport tithe obligations. These instances became more common as sector-level governors began to realise the asymmetric utility of trader fleets. Unlike the Astra Militarum or Adeptus Astartes, whose involvement often triggered full-scale warfare or political disruption, traders could operate in the margins, appearing not as conquerors, but as partners. This flexibility allowed them to manipulate frontier systems, install dynastic proxies in positions of planetary authority, and redirect regional flows of resources. The long-term implications were unclear. While the Imperium gained short-term stability, the cultural footprint of the dynasties often outlasted their contracts. In one documented case, the world of Paracal 7 celebrated a festival honouring the arrival of trader Anais Kell 3 centuries after her departure. The Administratum made no correction, instead noting that the festival increased tithe compliance by 19%. The closing years of the 39th millennium saw the most extensive rogue trader operation on record, the Comus expansion wave. This Imperium-sanctioned surge into the southern galactic rim involved 32 dynasties operating under shared charter, backed by logistical support from 4 Forge worlds and strategic oversight from 3 Segmentum branches. The wave was launched with the goal of reclaiming over 100 previously marked ghost worlds, planets recorded during the Great Crusade but lost to warp occlusion or Xenos encroachment. Over a span of 97 years, the operation succeeded in restoring contact with 37 worlds, integrating 15 and classifying 6 as extreme hazard zones. The remainder were either uninhabitable or consumed by ongoing warp storms. The Mechanicus classified the Comus expansion as a qualified success. Over 5,000 classified artifacts were recovered, including 5 partially intact Men of Gold remains and a functioning gravity collapse engine. The traders involved received varying degrees of reward. Some were granted dominion over entire systems, others were awarded permanent status as Mechanicus-aligned fleets, complete with rotating Magos crews and bespoke data access keys. The Administratum, meanwhile, processed the vast volume of reports into an updated macro schematic of the southern rim, correcting over 300 star route errors and expanding the navigator's warp chart registry by 16%. Yet, beneath the success, warning signs continued to accumulate. Several dynasties involved in the expansion returned showing signs of systemic deviation from Imperial norms. One had adopted warp signalling languages of unknown origin. Another returned with a complete absence of human crew, operated entirely by bound servitors and encrypted cogitator arrays. A third refused to re-enter known space entirely, broadcasting from an unknown region with coordinates that resolved into paradoxical void patterns. These events were quietly classified, their details buried within Mechanicus red data coils and administratum vaults labelled under sectoral asset irregularities. No formal action was taken. By the close of the millennium, the administratum quietly acknowledged what the Mechanicus had long suspected. The longer a dynasty operated beyond the Imperium's borders, the more likely it was to diverge, not just in practice, but in identity. Some traders became more alien than the enemies they were originally meant to confront. Others became saints to lost populations, architects of pocket empires that flew imperial banners but paid no heed to its laws. And yet, through it all, they remained essential. Without them, entire sectors would collapse, entire truths would go undiscovered, and entire timelines would unravel. Thus, they were tolerated, not for their loyalty, but for their utility. The Inquisition's relationship with rogue traders has never been defined by clarity, but by conditional tolerance shadowed by deep suspicion. Among the Ordo Xenos, Ordo Malleus, and Ordo Hereticus, there exists unanimous consensus that rogue traders pose a latent structural threat to the Imperium. This is not due to active malice, but systemic vulnerability. As sanctioned agents empowered to operate without oversight across unknown territories, they blur the distinction between imperial and post-imperial identities. It is within that blur that the Inquisition has observed some of its most troubling patterns: encounters with Xenos, trafficking of prescribed relics, unauthorized psychoactivity, and, in rarer cases, full cultural syncretism with alien civilizations. Inquisitorial records going back to the 32nd millennium mark the beginning of what became known as the divergence hypothesis. This theory, first documented in sealed files from the Ordo Xenos cell aboard Station 17 in the Gaven Halo, proposed that exposure to non-Terran thought systems, prolonged warp immersion, and deep space isolation produced measurable deviation in rogue trader dynasties over time. Case studies were built on a sample of 21 dynasties, each observed over more than 300 years of activity. 17 showed consistent symbolic divergence from imperial orthodoxy. 6 displayed ritual behaviours not recorded in the Ministorum lexicon. 3 employed Xenos advisors on their command staff, justified as non-aligned interpreters under the umbrella of diplomatic necessity. Though none of these findings were officially condemned at the time, the internal documents were marked for vault classification under Inquisitorial Security Code Black Omega. The first large-scale confrontation between the Inquisition and a rogue trader dynasty occurred during the Perith Rift incident. The Gorael dynasty, whose warrant predated the Horus Heresy, had spent over 6 centuries mapping the periphery of the Rift and maintaining informal alliances with semi-sentient crystalline entities found on the mineral world Rethys 6. When Inquisitor Malchior Ras of the Ordo Xenos arrived with orders to quarantine the planet, the Gorael fleet refused withdrawal. A brief but intense void battle followed, resulting in the destruction of 3 inquisitorial support vessels and the permanent psychogenic collapse of 1 astropathic choir. While Gorael's flagship was destroyed, the trader herself survived via escape pod, vanishing into warp space. Her later appearance on the Radostin front, operating under a different name and with a fully refitted vessel, confirmed the presence of fallback identities, falsified registries, and dynastic backup networks built beyond even Mechanicus knowledge. The incident was marked as a Class Omega breach and led to a standing Ordo directive. No rogue trader should be permitted sole access to Xenos-class intelligent species without real-time inquisitorial oversight. The depth of rogue trader compromise has rarely been captured as fully as it was in the Hesperal archive leaks. Discovered in the ruins of a dormant librarium on Indran's Moor, these data shards revealed suppressed communications between 3 rogue trader dynasties over a span of 70 years. The records describe coordinated artifact exchanges, private negotiation with TOE auxiliary envoys, and the establishment of what appears to have been a fixed-point warp trade route maintained through shared navigator symbology. More disturbing was the presence of language consistent with the lexicon of pre-Dark Age silicon consciousness, fragments that reference non-linear value chains and biomine collateralization. Inquisitor Valus of the Ordo Malleus, upon reviewing the archive, concluded that the traders in question had been in contact with a non-human intelligence of type SUV unknown. While the involved dynasties were never publicly named, all three disappeared from active registry within 20 years of the leak's discovery. The librarium and all related nodes were declared exterminatus-grade contamination sites. Within the Order Hereticus, the concern has often been theological rather than technological. Rogue traders, due to their exceptional legal autonomy, frequently escape traditional ecclesiarchal conditioning. Sermons aboard dynastic vessels vary wildly in content, and chaplaincy is often outsourced to contract preachers or relic priests of disputed authority. The Inquisition's review of 50 dynastic chapels revealed only 12 in alignment with Ministorum-approved scripture. Others contained iconography that merged emperor worship with solar rites, machine ancestor reverence, or human sacrifice theology repurposed from Xenos tribal systems. In some dynasties, the emperor was not portrayed as divine at all, but rather as a great explorer, a mythic progenitor of the trader's own journey into the void. While technically within the latitude of their warrant, these doctrinal aberrations have become red flags in Ordo Hereticus surveillance protocols. Dynasties with more than 5 recorded doctrinal anomalies are now automatically logged in predictive blasphemy matrices and monitored for signs of autonomous myth formation. Among the most disturbing findings come from incidents where traders returned to Imperial space altered in ways that defied standard categorization. Inquisitorial records from the Thalaxis containment zone describe the return of the Dreaming Knife, a vessel lost in the warp for over 400 years. Its crew showed minimal signs of aging but extensive cognitive restructuring. All records aboard the ship had been restructured into pictograms and audio tones, with no verbal or written language used. Command was maintained by what appeared to be a Gestalt conscience formed from the remaining bridge crew, functioning as a single decision-making entity. The Inquisition, suspecting demonic interference, initiated full containment and psychic sterilization. No signs of demonic taint were found, but the phenomenon was classified as a Type 6 warp-mind fusion, previously undocumented in any naval asset. The dynasty's warrant was revoked and destroyed under psychic fire, and the crew members were individually deconstructed for forensic examination by the Ordo's biopurgation unit. By the early years of the 40th millennium, the Inquisition had begun classifying rogue traders not simply as high-value irregular agents, but as latent systemic threats whose utility masked unpredictable ideological drift. The Ordo Xenos, in particular, compiled over 100 internal case studies concerning traders who had developed complex trade agreements with alien powers not officially catalogued within the Imperial Index of Recognized Species. In several such cases, it became clear that traders had developed these relationships not out of ignorance or necessity, but as a calculated tactic to circumvent munitorum restrictions, ecclesiarchal dogma, or forge world monopolies. The dynasty of Kephalon Maya, for instance, is recorded negotiating material exchanges with a silicon-based Xenos race, later identified by the Inquisition as the Sibilant Strata. These entities, which communicated through vibratory patterns transmitted through mineral lattices, provided advanced crystalline targeting matrices in exchange for atmospheric nitrogen surplus and abandoned servitor shells. Mia's fleet, enhanced with this technology, displayed uncanny targeting precision across 3 sub-sector engagements, results so anomalous that they triggered a re-evaluation of his prior battle logs and logistics claims. When approached by Ordo Xenos operatives, the dynasty vanished from its declared route and reappeared 2 years later in an unrelated sector under a new trade identity. The more closely the Inquisition examined these anomalies, the more complex the picture became. Internal memos from the Ordo Hereticus revealed instances of rogue trader fleets establishing replacement societal structures in systems nominally compliant with Imperial doctrine. These systems maintained tithes, employed Adeptus-encoded transmission formats, and avoided known heresies, yet the cultural scaffolding beneath the surface was entirely alien. One striking example was the planet known as Vos Parati, recovered and reintegrated by the Thrinaxis dynasty. According to surface reports, the world adhered to standard Imperial social protocols. However, linguistic decryption of their legal code revealed a governance structure based on competitive mercantile pacts sealed by ritual blood transfusions, an archaic model derived from early Terran pre-Unity cult economies, combined with rogue navigator mythos. When Inquisitor Haleb Deverin investigated, he noted that the planetary population referred to the trader as a seated god, and his heir as a flesh beacon. Despite clear signs of developing personality cults and low-grade psychic phenomena, the tithes were met with perfect punctuality, and no religious uprisings were recorded. The Inquisitor submitted his full report with the appended recommendation: observe, do not interfere. Cases of warp anomaly propagation tied directly to rogue trader activity became more frequent during this period. The most infamous of these incidents, known within restricted Ordo Malleus databanks as the Guilt Spiral breach, originated from the misnavigation of a trader vessel into a region of sub-warp instability. The vessel, the Carcenti Rose, returned from a 6-decade absence with no human crew remaining. Instead, it was populated by artificial constructs composed of silico-organic matter and bound to fractal neural code. A psychic imprint of the original trader remained embedded in the ship's core systems and communicated only in echo loops. The Inquisition immediately initiated a sectoral red writ, and the ship was boarded by a 10-man Grey Knight squad led by Brother Captain Laskai. All constructs were destroyed, but not before one relayed a coded message referring to a temporal reflection engine and a failed negotiation with the mirror that sings. No clear identification of this entity was made. Laskai's report concluded with the chilling statement, "No demon present, no mind to purge, only memory, refusing to die." A psychic imprint of the original trader remained embedded in the ship's core systems and communicated only in echo loops. The Inquisition immediately initiated a sectoral red writ, and the ship was boarded by a 10-man Grey Knight squad led by Brother Captain Laskai. All constructs were destroyed, but not before one relayed a coded message referring to a temporal reflection engine and a failed negotiation with the mirror that sings. No clear identification of this entity was made. Laskai's report concluded with the chilling statement, "No demon present, no mind to purge, only memory, refusing to die." In cases where direct inquisitorial intervention was deemed excessive, proxy operations were employed. One method included the assignment of Ordo-affiliated navigators or astropathic eavesdroppers aboard suspect dynastic fleets. These agents operated under deep cover identities and maintained multiple fail-safes to avoid detection. One successful example involved a member of the Ordo Xenos posing as a junior chartist aboard the fleet of Vale Quintus, whose dynasty was suspected of trafficking in ancient Elder relics. The operative's transmissions detailed the presence of an unknown webway fragment concealed within the ship's primary reliquary vault. This fragment, identified later by Eldar Corsairs during an unrelated skirmish, allowed intermittent access to a sealed node within the dead craft world of Mirvain. The trader had been utilizing it as a vault and negotiation site for dealings with at least 2 alien factions. The Inquisition seized the fragment and erased all shipboard records of the dynasty's contact with the artifact. However, the dynasty itself was not sanctioned. It remains active to this day, having formally denounced all connection with the incident and dismissed the report as Xenos forgery. Suppressed findings from the Ordo Chronos complicate the picture even further. In at least 3 separate instances, recovered astropathic fragments contain partial chronosignatures inconsistent with linear time flow. In one of the most well-preserved signals, a trader identified as Valxen Thorn transmits his location coordinates using stellar formations that no longer exist in their recorded configurations. Cross-reference with Forge World cartographic data revealed that the coordinates correspond to a star cluster lost in a warp rift 4 millennia prior. The Ordo Chronos issued a redacted report hypothesizing that the trader's fleet had entered a chrono-displacement loop, or possibly emerged from a divergent timeline. While no confirmation of temporal deviation was possible, the Thorn dynasty reappeared 3 centuries later near the Halo stars, entirely unaware of its chronological displacement and still operating under mission parameters issued 5,000 years earlier. All contact with the dynasty was immediately classified, and its ship was sequestered by a Mechanicus recovery team under the cover of a navigational quarantine. The common theme running through these archives is not treachery, but entropy. Dynasties rarely fall through open heresy or rebellion. They drift, subtly, persistently, away from imperial orthodoxy, eroded not by defiance but by isolation, necessity, and the absorption of what the Imperium dares not understand. Traders are often unwilling to reject the Emperor. Rather, they reinterpret him. They recalibrate doctrine, reconfigure hierarchy, and reverse engineer belief to serve the frontier's demands. This is not defiance in the classic sense, it is mutation without declaration, and it is precisely that silence which the Inquisition finds most dangerous. In the final centuries of the 40th millennium, inquisitorial surveillance logs show a dramatic increase in indirect references to rogue trader dynasties, operating beyond imperial expectation. These references were rarely straightforward. Instead, they emerged through side-channel events, intercepted Xenos communications, warp echo anomalies, missing expeditionary fleets, and unexplained shifts in long-term cultural drift within border systems. Across more than 90 fragmentary reports, a pattern began to emerge. Entire subsectors bore the unmistakable hallmarks of prolonged trader presence, yet no corresponding dynasties were officially listed as active within them. Local population records included hereditary names matching those of trader lineages. Machine spirit logs showed transit echoes from vessel IDs dating back over 2,000 years. When inquisitorial kill teams were dispatched to investigate, most found either empty settlements or thriving human colonies with no memory of the Imperium, but full fluency in High Gothic, standard tithing protocols, and syncretized devotional models centered around the name of the absent trader. The Ordo Hereticus case file designated Echo Orphanum provides a particularly well-preserved example. The planet in question, Pelisar Tertius, was discovered in late 40th millennium by Inquisitor Maranthul during a routine compliance assessment. The population displayed no visible mutation, passed all psychic nullfield screenings, and adhered to a clean tithe regimen. Yet all cultural references centered around a mythic figure known only as the Contract Binder. This figure, according to oral and administrative traditions, had established their economic, legal and religious systems before vanishing with a promise to return when the void sings again. No record of this dynasty existed in the administratum. No active warrant matched the name. The only surviving anomaly was a static warp beacon buried below the primary city's foundations, its signal encrypted in an obsolete trader dialect no longer taught anywhere in the Imperium. The Ordo designated the planet conditionally secure and placed it under long-term observation by the Silent Order. No attempt was made to reintegrate it. Other incidents carried even greater implications. The Tolan relay transgression, recovered through deep sensor drone triangulation in the wake of a planetary implosion, included fragments of a trader fleet transmitting data directly to a Necron tomb complex. The footage, though degraded, clearly shows human crew entering the site in standard void suits, carrying data slates and what appeared to be phasic mineral samples for trade evaluation. No overt signs of coercion were visible. The Necron units present, probable Cryptek class, made no hostile moves. The footage ended abruptly, overwritten by a warp-corrupting signal burst traced to a Mechanicus interdiction protocol. The Ordo Xenos seized the fragment and redacted all knowledge of the relay. The dynasty suspected to be involved, unnamed in the final report, was declared subject to Mark V non-interference protocol, a rare status granted only to individuals or fleets considered too valuable to eliminate and too dangerous to confront. The file closed with a one-line inquisitorial note: "Compromise is total. Utility remains." The most damning event in the last century of the millennium came not from discovered activity, but from absence. In the Helion Drift, a routine ecclesiarchal mapping pilgrimage encountered a derelict artificial ring world spanning over 100,000 kilometers in circumference. The structure's origin was unclear, but linguistic markings along its inner curvature showed stylized imperial lettering, blended with Gothic archaic phrases. The most prominent phrase, repeated at regular intervals, read, "The trade never ends." No crew or life forms were present, but genetic scans of the structure's biometric access systems confirmed compatibility with 5 known dynastic bloodlines. The entire structure had been built, at least partially, by human hands. The energy core was dormant, the servitor maintenance system cold and unrecoverable. The Mechanicus requested full salvage rights, but the Inquisition placed the site under eternal quarantine, citing its symbolic magnitude as a threat to ecclesiarchal cohesion. No official statement was ever made. The pilgrim fleet was reassigned, and the ecclesiarchy's record of the event was reclassified as a warp delusion mass event. Over time, the Inquisition revised its operational assumptions regarding rogue traders, Initially regarded as extensions of Imperial will in the void, they had become autonomous nodes of human expansion. Their goals, though still nominally aligned with Imperial interests, diverged into the establishment of soft empires, artifact networks, and post-Imperial cultures. These developments did not always result in heresy. Often, they simply reflected the raw adaptability of human will when unshackled from bureaucracy. This was, paradoxically, both the greatest threat and the greatest strength they posed. A report from Inquisitor Rylan Orr of the Ordo Xenos summed it concisely. They are not traitors, they are precursors. We fear them not because they defy us, but because they reveal what we might become. The darkest archived material, stored beneath sigil-locked vaults on Ordo Central stations, touches on theories that remain unconfirmed and possibly apocryphal. One such theory, extracted from a decrypted heretic's memory core, posits that several rogue trader dynasties may have discovered or constructed permanent non-warp transit methods. The core references coordinates to a location outside known galactic structure, where time, space, and mass operate on looped constants. This region, described using terms resembling both Eldar myth and Mechanicus data vortex theory, may have served as a staging ground for what the core calls the Ascended Trade. Whether this refers to an actual splinter civilization formed by traders, or merely a failed heretic model of post-imperial economics, remains unknown. The file is tagged Alpha Reticula Obscura and includes the advisory. If true, entire structural doctrine must be reconsidered. Ultimately, the Inquisition continues to permit rogue trader activity not because it trusts them, but because it cannot replace them. They are unorthodox, irreducible, and irreplaceable. Every major expansion, every successful contact with lost colonies or unknown species, every strategic resource recovery from dead stars or fractured timelines, nearly all stem first from their efforts. The Imperium relies on them to touch what cannot be touched, to see what must not be seen, and to bring back knowledge that the High Lords themselves fear to name. And so long as they continue to serve, the Imperium will pretend not to see how much they've changed. The archives remain open, the silence is maintained, the trade continues,